So now we're looking at Daf Mem Beis Amud Beis, and we're continuing with the brisa about the status of a katan. Hayodel Lishma. Rashi says, La'amein Yadav L'shchita. He is an uman, meaning he's an expert. He has the skills. He knows how to do shchita. Shchita is not simple. You have to avoid drisa and shehiyah. You can't push the knife down, and you can't stop in the middle of the shchita. Many laws of shchita, the 5 psulim of shchita. And he is an expert of a choker. The only problem is he's a katan. And if he shouts privately, how do I know? Can I trust him? Can I rely on his testimony? We're talking about a suffix isa treifa, isa nevela, which is a dorais. So if Huna qualifies this statement of the Bryce, if Huna, when does this apply? Shegadol omeid al gab. We have the testimony of a gadol who supervised him and can guarantee that he did not mess up on the shchita. He was not in any way violating any of the psulei shchita. So the Gemara now goes back to the Bryce. In other words, we just took a little break from the Brisa to explain Rav Huna that a shchita of a katan, it's not enough that he's an expert shochet. We also will require a gadol omeid al gab. So that even if he's an expert shochet, if there's no gadol omeid al gabav, we do not rely on its shchita. By the way, Rashi mentions that he's an expert shochet, meaning he's an uman in yadayim. You see the emphasis on yadayim. What does he know? Can you test him in the laws of shchita? You know that for a person to get recognized as a shochet ubodek, he has to be subject to an examination. And he has to prove that not only does he know how to implement shchita, but he knows the laws of shchita, because many questions can come up. My father's first rabbanos, when he was a youngster, right out of Smicha, he was 22 years old. He was a rav in a town north of Boston in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, in Maine. My mistake. Far north. And there was a lot of shchita coming through that city. It was called Bangor. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Bangor, Maine. So my father was a rav in Bangor, Maine, close to a century ago. 90 years ago. And I don't want to tell you the whole story, but the kids are Maisa. There were 2 shoftim in Bangor, and my father checked them out. Terrible. They were being machil, the velus treifus to Klal Yisrael. Anyway, the story has a very sad ending because my father had to leave Bangor because he tried to, whatever. So it seems from Rashi that this child, if there's gadol omeid al gabav, his shchita is reliable and acceptable, even if he doesn't know the laws of shchita. You can test him; he's not going to pass the exam. Interesting. All Rashi needs is the expertise, and we have a gadol omeid al gabav that's testifying that indeed he did not hassle the shchita, and then we can eat from his shchita. Now we get back to the brisa. That was just a. What's it called in English when you take a little? I'm looking for a different, anyway. If the child has reached the age, when the child is, an infant is very young, you don't feed him cookies and breads, hard for him to digest. Once he reaches the level that he can eat a full kizayis of dagan, then it means that his digestive system is more developed, and his feces are considered soa l'chol davar. We have to be marchik, we have to be far away from his soa if we want to read a part of Torah, or if we want to study Torah, if we want to daven. His marchikim, how far do you have to go from his soa? Mitzoa, so we may ragavinim from his urine is arba amos, 4 amos. Why? Because once he can eat grain, then his waste products are very repulsive. And that's real soul. I mean, you have to learn almost a whole parak in Masechet Brachos to learn all the dinim about soul. It's one of the less aesthetically pleasing prokim in Shabbos. All the details about soul. I mean, unbelievable how the Chazal went into every single nuance about soul.
Like a baby, you don't have. Like
right.
A baby, you don't have to worry about.
Correct. Again, I'm not paskin. You know, you gotta go look in Shulchan Aruch. But if you're learning a daf, the daf yomi, then if you change the diaper of a baby, you don't have to be marchik. It's not enough that he can nibble at a loaf of bread, at a piece of bread, and eat it slowly. He has to be capable of eating it at a pretty, relatively quick pace, which is called kezayis b'chdei achilas pras. Now, exactly how long of a period of time it is, it's relevant to me as a Mesader Kiddushin, because we need yichud for that shear of time after the chuppah. I would say 9 minutes, but their poskim were very maker. They go down to 4 minutes and even 3 minutes. I don't know if there's anyone, somebody told me this, you can rely on a sheet that says 2 minutes. I don't know. I think it's more like 4 minutes or as much as 9 minutes. A pras, which means split, is half a loaf of bread. Now, how much is a full loaf? It might be 8 beitzim. It might be, according to another sheet, 6 beitzim. So a pras is either 4 beitzim or 3 beitzim. And how long would it take to eat either 4 or 3 beitzim's worth of bread? Is it 3 minutes? Is it 8 minutes, 9 minutes? And the child is developed enough that he can eat that amount of bread called a kezayis within that period of time. Then his soa is to be reckoned with. The chsiv, and here the Gemara quotes a pasuk of all places, Shlomo Melech in Koheles. V'yosif das, Yosif machov. You know, sometimes when you get mature and you're wise, then it's more painful because you're aware of all sorts of suffering in life. You know, the young children are living in a bubble. I don't know if that's true today anymore, but in the old days. But machov is taken out of context, al pidrush, to refer to having to be marchik from his tzoa because it has a very foul odor. So that Yosef das here in this context, the way the Darshan Gemara is an allusion not to intellectual wisdom, but rather to eating bread. So when he's able to be Mosif bread such that he can eat it at a quick pace, then Yosef machal. Yochel lechel kezayis tzli, shoftin olavis ha-pesach. We have a halacha called minui, which means that we will check the Korban Pesach in a chabura, and we will invite people to join us in the chabura. And those who are in that chabura, and only those who are manui, they've been signed up and registered, they can eat from basar tzli. You know that the Korban Pesach has to be roasted, but a katan, can we include him in the minui so that he can also eat from the Korban Pesach? And the Brisa says, it all depends. Can he eat a kezayis tzli? Now, I'm not sure, but my intuition tells me, maybe somebody comments on this, I don't know. We'll look around. And it means that, let's say at the age of 5, just throwing out a number, he can eat a kezayis of has, any product of the 5 species of grains, but to eat basar tzli, you need to develop a more advanced gastro system. Doc, does that make any sense? That when you eat meat, maybe you have to be a little more mature, maybe 7, 8.
You have to chew it more.
You have to chew it more.
No.
So I don't know. I would have to see. Oh, I see something here. Just 1 second. Oh, I see. This says Yeshi yochel lechel kezayis mevushal ve'ena yochel lechel kezayis tzli. But since the mitzvah is tzli, even though you could give him, how should I say, cooked chicken, and he can eat that, but he can't eat a kezayis tzli. But anyway, you do see from Tosafos that eating tzli, basar tzli, requires a higher level of maturity. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it's not sufficient that he's reached this mature level that he can eat sliya, kazayas of sli, which is the minimum amount for the mitzvah achilas hapesach, the achlos abasa b'layla. That he has to have another condition that will require that he be even more mature, and that is that he knows exactly what's edible and what's not edible. If you give a child almost anything, an infant, he'll put it into his mouth. A piece of Lego, that's why it's so dangerous to play with Lego. I can give you 1,000,001 examples. We tried to raise 6 children. Now we're in the next level. We're trying to raise our grandchildren. It's very dangerous. You have to be so careful that what a child puts into his mouth. But this young man, or young woman, has already matured to a higher level. And nostin lo tzrar, if you give him a small pebble, zarko, he knows that he throws it away. You give him a small ego, it's a walnut, which looks almost identical. Maybe it's got a lighter color, but he realizes that he can eat it. It's edible. Now we begin the 4th parak of Masechet Sukkah Be'ez Hashem. The Mishnah says, Lulav harav hashisha v'shiva. So depending upon when the first day of Sukkot will fall, whether it falls on a Shabbos or a weekday, the lulav will be taken either a full 7 days or only 6 out of the 7 days. The same is true for an Arav. The Mishnah is going to work it out, so hold on. Halel v'simcha shmona, but in the cases of Halel and Simcha, we'll see what Simcha means, then it's a full 8 days, which means we include Shmini Atzeres. So Halel will be recited a full Halel from the first day of Sukkot until and including Shmini Atzeres. This is in contradistinction to Pesach. In the case of Pesach, we only recite Halel on the first day of Pesach, 1 out of 7 days. The other 6 days do not have Halel. We have a minhag of reciting a Halel, but that's not the real Halel. And the Gemara Rosh Hashanah tries to analyze what's the difference between Chol Hamoed Sukkos that generates a chiyuv Halel and Chol Hamoed Pesach that does not. And the Gemara answers that in the case of Sukkah, it's what's called chidush musafim, meaning every day of Sukkot has a different musaf. That's the kriya of that day. But the kriya for Pesach is the same identical kriya for every single day because you always bring the exact same carbon. So there's no chidush carbon and there's no halal. Halal is generated by carbon. Why that's so? You'd have to learn Masechet Erech Afyu. Sukkah, of course, is 7 full days. And Nisach HaMayim likewise is, let's say, Aloch Moshe Sinai, 7 full days. HaCholil Chamisha B'Shisha. But with regard to the Cholil, we're going to have an entire chapter in Masechet Sukkah about the Cholil, the flute. That's either 5 days or 6 days maximum. In other words, there will not be any blowing of the Chalil on Shabbos. And every Sukkah coincides with 1 day minimum of Shabbos, and therefore the maximum number of days for Chalil is 6, under certain cases 5. And now the Mishnah will explain every single one of these calculations. Lulav Shiva Ketzad. Under what circumstances do we take the lulav all 7 days? That is Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shechalil B'Shabbos. If Shabbos coincides with the first day of Sukkot, then we will take the lulav even on Shabbos. And the Gemara is going to ask, why would we think otherwise? We're already Chachamim. We know why we think otherwise, because maybe the lulav is mukta, or there may be a problem of carrying it to Daled Amos. He might inadvertently carry it to Rosh Hashanah. But all this is suspended if Shabbos coincides with the first day of Sukkot. Why is the first day of Sukkot special? Well, in the Mikdash, it's not special. The first day of Sukkot is identical with all the 6 days in the balance of Sukkot. But we're going to upgrade the status of Lulav in the Mikdash on the first day of Sukkot because in Gvul and in Medina, meaning outside the Mikdash, it's a mitzvah to take the lulav. And somehow we're going to, I don't want to use the word integrate, but to some extent, the mitzvah of gvulin, of lulav, is going to impact on the mitzvah of lulav b'migdash, to the extent in which the first day of Sukkot in Migdash is upgraded to a special status, such that we're going to allow him to take the lulav even on Shabbos, because the first day of Sukkot is a special status, and we prove it because in Gvulin, outside of the Migdash, it's a mitzvah dora. Sharayom. Now, what happens if Shabbos falls on one of the other days of Sukkot? So the first day of Sukkot was not on Shabbos. Then Shisha. Then we're going to have to get very worried about taking the lulav on Shabbos, and we don't have that special, unique status of the first day of Sukkot because now Shabbos fell on one of the other days of Sukkot, and we're not going to allow you to take the lulav. So the maximum number of days of lulav is now going to be 6. Arava Shiva Kates, I don't know what circumstances do we take the Arava on all 7 days, and once again, Yom HaShvi. Now here, what we said about the first day of Sukkot, now we shift to the last day of Sukkot, which is called what? Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is a special mitzvah of Arava, and therefore, if Yom HaShvi Shal Arava, the 7th day of Sukkot, coincides with Shabbos, Sechalios b'Shabbos, then we will be in fact taking the Arava on all 7 days. But Arava, so that's Arava Shiva. But Shari Kol Yom Shisha, if on the other hand Shabbos falls out on one of the first 6 days of Sukkot, not on the 7th Hoshana Rabbah, then on that day of Shabbos we do not take the Arava, and therefore we're going to have to reduce the sum total of days of Arava from 7 down to 6. So in a certain sense, the law of Arava was combined with the law of Lulav as a mirror image, the only difference being that with regard to Sukkah, with regard to Lulav, it's the first day of Sukkot that's critical. With regard to the Arava, it's the last day of Sukkot, and that's critical.
Because the base of Midrash were destroyed during the Mishnah. Like all these.
I'm pretty sure this is exactly la halacha. Okay. Mitzvahs lulav ketzad. So let's take first the case where Shabbos coincides with the first day of Sukkot. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag Chalios b'Shabbos. But lichenes lulaveim la'Har Bayis. On Friday they take the lulav to the Har Bayis. Now, this gets a little bit rough, meaning dangerous. What the Israelis call marpei kim. I don't know if you know what I mean. Elbows, yeah, because the Migdash is now absolutely flooded with lulavim. HaChazonim mekabel mehem. So the Chazonim are those who are appointed to keep the order, to avoid anarchy. They received the lulavim. Now, on the Har Bayis, there were benches with coverings over, like an egged bus station, if you know what I mean, to protect the lulav from the sun. And they would place, the Chazonim would place the lulavim on these benches. The elder statesmen were afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow on Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot, when everyone runs for their lulav. And therefore, they hid their lulavim in a lishka. The Mishnah doesn't tell us which lishka, but apparently they had designated a certain chamber where the Zkadim were permitted to hide their lulavim and avoid the crowd. This is what I feel like when I go to a chassan, a yeshiva chassan, and they dance. And I once almost lost my foot. And my father's almost had the photographer dropped his camera on my father's head. I mean, the chassan could be dangerous. Call me shemagil lulave liyado hare. I'm sorry, I skipped. When we teach them, we train them. that every person should make a declaration. There's a very good chance that you're going to end up with someone else's lulav. So therefore, you have to make sure that the owner of the lulav made this declaration that it's yours for matana. Because otherwise, you can't be yotze the mitzvah lulav. The Torah says, "L'kachtem lachem." You have to own it. Now, what happens the next day? All heck breaks loose. Pardon me. Everybody gets up early to get to the Harabayas. The Chazodim are like shaking you. Everyone's attacking them. Where's my lulav? So they throw it out there. Each one grabbed the lulav. They started beating each other up. This reminds me of the Gemara in Masechet Yomi that we learned. The Gemara says that when the Kohanim were running up the kevesh, sometimes one Kohen would push another Kohen off the kevesh. It's very dangerous. And therefore, because again, a lulav is very sharp. Chas v'sholom, it goes into your eye. I don't know. You can kill a person. I was once walking with my father many, many years ago, and there were, young children that, they were objecting to Shabbos, kill Shabbos. So they were throwing apples at cars, young children. So my father said, in Yerushalayim. So my father said to one of these children, he said, Shiro Bezin Shaboli de Sakoni, he can kill someone with an apple too. His kinu sheyehei kol echad v'echad noto b'beis. You've got to fulfill your lulav in your house. Amai, the Gemara says, what's the problem with taking a lulav on Shabbos? Tiltul bi'almahu v'lidchei Shabbos. Okay, maybe it's muktzah. That's the big deal. But for the sake of a mitzvah, we're not going to override muktzah. Muktzah is only a gzera. Omar Rabba, no. We're not worried about muktzah. We're worried about something much more fundamental. And shall I say, chomer, how do you say, more stringent? And that is, this is one of the most famous statements in all of Shas. It's called Gzeira de Rabba. It appears all over the place. Gzeira Hashem yitlenu biyado v'yelech etzel baki lilmod. He is going to take the lulav and ask a baki to teach him. And here on the top of Mem Gimel and Aleph, the Avirenu Arba Amos B'Shusarab. Any time it is Shofar, any time to Megillah. So when a mitzvah coincides with Shabbos, we're not worried about muktzah. That's a halbator. We're worried about something much more severe, and that's Havaras Daled Amos B'Shusarab, which is a chiyuv chatos and a violation of malacha of skila. And therefore, we're going to do away with the mitzvah. And Rashi asks, how do the Chachamim have the authority to do such a thing? That's the Rashi a little bit later on the page, about 15 lines down. And Rashi says that Yesh Koch Biad Chachamim Lakar Dovim and Torah B'Shev V'Altis. It's the Sugi Yevamis that I'm actually teaching here at 10:35 in my third shift in the morning, that the Chacham are authorized to tell you to sit passively rather than actively fulfill a mitzvah in a case where they're afraid that by fulfilling the mitzvah, you'll violate a Torah law. The big discussion here, we don't have time for it now, in this Rashi is, and that's Tosfos also, Rashi tries to answer this question, why is it that Rabbah is worried about Havaras Daled Amos B'Shusarab? Why isn't he worried about Otsah Mishusayachil B'Shusarab? The minute he takes the lulav out of his house, he's already stepped into a public domain. And the moment, even if he hasn't walked 4 hours, he violates a malacha and a chiyuv skila dorais. And Rashi has all sorts of cases in which he continues walking and he didn't make a hanacha, and that's going to be a discussion. So I want to wish everyone a great day, and thank you so much. Okay then.
They brought.
So tomorrow we'll do Mem Gimel, all right? Yeah, what'd you say?
Loving to the basic